a hidden human supervessel, revealed itself. Every empire instantly regretted their choices. Part 1. The Council Chamber aboard Nexus Prime was the largest meeting space in known space. Delegates from 200 civilizations filled the vast hall, their forms as varied as the stars themselves. Some breathed oxygen, others methane. Some stood on legs, others floated in containment fields. But today, they all shared one thing in common. They were angry. Ambassador sat in the human delegation's modest section, her face carefully neutral. Around her, the chamber erupted in shouting. The delegate, a massive creature covered in dark scales, slammed his forearms against his podium. His translator rendered his words in flat, emotionless tones that somehow made them more threatening. The human vessel entered a military zone. It paid the price for its stupidity. His fingers tightened on her chair's armrest. The Prosperity had been a merchant ship, unarmed, carrying medical supplies to the colony at station. 43 people had been aboard, 43 humans who would never see their families again, vaporized in an instant when Vex warships had opened fire on each other. The Prosperity had just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. "We demand justice," said Standing. Her voice carried through the chamber's speakers, translated instantly into hundreds of languages. The Prosperity was a civilian vessel in neutral space. Your reckless warfare destroyed it and killed everyone aboard. The Vex representative, a being that looked like liquid metal poured into a vaguely humanoid shape, rippled with what might have been laughter. "Justice. Your species has been in space for barely a century. You fly primitive ships held together with welding and hope. If you cannot protect your vessels, perhaps you should stay on your birth world." Murmurs of agreement echoed through the chamber. Looked around and saw the truth written on every alien face. They didn't take humanity seriously. Earth had 12 colony worlds and maybe 300 military ships scattered across 100 light years. The Dominion had thousands of worlds and fleets that could blot out stars. The Vex Consortium controlled half the galaxy's trade routes. The Eldest Collective had been traveling between stars when humanity's ancestors were still living in caves. Compared to them, humanity was nothing. Drew in a slow breath. "You have made a grave miscalculation," she said quietly. The delegate laughed, a sound like grinding rocks. "Is that a threat, little human? Will you send your handful of rust bucket warships against us?" Didn't answer. She simply gathered her papers, nodded to her staff, and walked out of the chamber. Behind her, she could hear the laughter growing louder. 3 days later, the attacks began. The struck first, as expected. They'd been looking for an excuse to expand their territory, and humanity's weak response had given them confidence. 50 warships dropped out of hyperspace above Haven's Gate, humanity's second-largest colony. 5 million people lived on the planet below, farming the rich soil and building lives far from Earth. The colony's defense force consisted of 8 frigates and a dozen orbital platforms. They fought bravely. They lasted 17 minutes. Troops landed across Haven's Gate within the hour. The planetary governor sent desperate messages to Earth, then to the Galactic Council. No response came. They settled in, claiming the world as their own. At almost the same moment, Vex ships surrounded the asteroid mining colonies at Copper Ridge. 300,000 miners lived and worked in the hollowed-out rocks, extracting rare minerals that Earth desperately needed. The Vex didn't even bother with a fight. They simply jammed all communications and announced that Copper Ridge now belonged to the consortium. The third attack was the Eldest Collective had always been interested in humanity's genetics, fascinated by how quickly humans had adapted to space travel. Their bioships appeared in orbit over new seasons, a peaceful agricultural world where families grew crops under an orange sun. The Eldest didn't invade. They abducted. Teleportation beams plucked thousands of humans from their homes and fields, pulling them screaming into the alien vessels above. The Galactic Council met again in emergency session. This time they weren't angry. They were celebrating. The human problem has been solved, the delegate announced. Perhaps now they will learn their place in the galactic order. 3 of their colonies in a single day, the Vex representative added. Their remaining worlds will surrender within a week. They have no choice. Ambassador's chair sat empty. Earth had recalled her immediately after the attacks began. The celebration continued for hours. Representatives congratulated each other on the swift action. Several smaller species that had been bullied by the 3 empires watched nervously, wondering if they would be next. The strong did as they pleased and the weak suffered. That was how the galaxy worked. Then the reports started coming in. The first message arrived from the occupation force on Haven's Gate. The transmission was brief and confused. Contact lost with northern continent garrisons. Investigating. An hour later, all garrison sites empty, troops gone, no signs of struggle, no bodies, nothing. The Vex reported similar problems at Copper Ridge. Their ships remained in perfect position around the asteroids, but the mining colonies themselves had gone dark. Every communication channel was silent. Scanners showed life signs, but no one responded to hails. The eldest reported the strangest phenomenon. Their bioships filled with thousands of human captives simply stopped. Not powered down or damaged. Stopped. Floating dead in space, all systems dormant, as if the ships themselves had decided to quit. The Council demanded answers. What was happening? The 3 empires sent reinforcement fleets to their newly conquered territories. They dispatched 300 warships to Haven's Gate. The Vex sent their tactical specialists and 100 more vessels to Copper Ridge. The eldest grew an entirely new generation of bioships and sent them to retrieve their dormant vessels. None of them came back. Not destroyed, not captured, just gone, as if they had jumped to hyperspace and forgotten to stop. Long-range sensors detected nothing. Communication nets stayed silent. 3 entire fleets, thousands of ships, simply vanished. Panic began to replace celebration in the council chambers. What kind of weapon could make entire fleets disappear without a trace? The smaller species started backing away from the 3 empires, afraid of being caught in whatever retribution was coming. Ambassador requested to address the council. After heated debate, they agreed. She appeared via hologram, broadcasting from Earth. Behind her, blue skies and green fields showed through a window. She looked tired but calm. "People of the Galactic Council," she began. 10 days ago, I warned you that you had made a grave miscalculation. You chose not to listen. You destroyed one of our civilian ships and laughed at our grief. When we asked for justice, you mocked us. When we asked for peace, you invaded our homes. The chamber was absolutely silent now. You saw our small fleet and assumed we were weak. You saw our peaceful nature and assumed we were afraid. You made a fundamental error in understanding humanity. Paused, her expression hardening. You thought we were trying our best and falling short. You never considered that we might be holding back. Holding back, the delegate's voice shook with barely contained rage. You have nothing. Where are our fleets? What have you done? We tried to warn you, said quietly. Now you'll learn why humanity never built a large fleet. She leaned forward. Because we never needed one. Impossible, you're bluffing. Where are our ships? His expression didn't change. They're exactly where they were. Haven's Gate, Copper Ridge, New Seasons, still sitting in orbit around our colonies. Your crews are simply contained, unharmed for now, along with every single human you tried to capture. You expect us to believe a species with 300 ships could defeat 3 entire battle fleets. The Vex representative's voice dripped with scorn. No, said, I expect you to believe that a species with 300 ships would only have 300 ships if that was all they needed. She glanced down at something off-screen. Your reinforcement fleets are also contained, by the way, completely intact. We don't destroy if we don't have to. The council erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted at their translators, trying to make sense of what they were hearing. How could humanity possibly have such power and never use it, never threaten with it, never even hint at it? Raised her hand, and somehow the gesture commanded silence. "We didn't want this," she said, and for the first time, emotion cracked through her diplomatic mask. "We came to the stars hopping to find friends. We tried to coexist peacefully. We built a small fleet because we wanted to show we weren't a threat, and you took that as an invitation to attack us." She stood up, her full height visible in the hologram. "We gave you every chance to choose peace. You chose war instead. Now you'll learn what happens when humanity stops trying to be friendly and starts trying to survive." His next words echoed through the chamber like a death sentence. "The Leviathan is coming. God help you all." The transmission ended. For a long moment, nobody moved, nobody spoke. Then the sensors started screaming. Every deep space monitoring station in the galaxy detected it simultaneously. A gravitational anomaly beyond anything in their databases. Something massive was moving through hyperspace, and it was heading toward the core systems. The thing that emerged from the fold in spacetime made the watching civilizations realize just how badly they had miscalculated. They had thought they understood the scale of warfare. They had thought they knew what power looked like. They had been so very wrong. Part 2. The sensor readings made no sense. Every civilization in the galaxy had long-range observation arrays pointed at the anomaly, and every single one of them was reporting impossible numbers. The computers kept recalculating, certain they had made a mistake, but the readings didn't change. The object moving through hyperspace was 200 kilometers long. For context, the largest battleship measured 3 kilometers from bow to stern. The Vex considered their 5-kilometer trade haulers to be engineering marvels. The eldest ancient bioships, grown over centuries, rarely exceeded 8 kilometers. But this thing dwarfed all of them combined. It was less a ship and more a flying city, a mobile civilization unto itself. When it dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Haven's gate system, the true scale became visible. The human supervessel hung in space like a dark moon, its hull bristling with structures that could have been weapon emplacements or entire manufacturing complexes. Lights glittered across its surface in patterns that suggested cities, habitation zones, research facilities. The thing wasn't just a warship. It was a self-contained world. The occupation force at Haven's Gate, what remained of it, immediately went to combat alert. Every ship powered up their weapons. Every shield generator pushed to maximum. 300 kilometers away, the massive human vessel simply existed, making no aggressive moves. Making no moves at all, really. It just sat there as if waiting. Then it spoke. The transmission went out on every frequency simultaneously, in every known language. The voice was calm, measured, and utterly without mercy. "This is Fleet Admiral of the Terran Defense Force vessel Leviathan. You are occupying human territory illegally. You have 12 hours to return all human civilians unharmed and withdraw completely from our space. If you comply, you will be allowed to leave peacefully. If you refuse, I will remove you by force. There will be no negotiation. There will be no second warning. Choose wisely." The Imperator, watching from his throne world 300 light-years away, laughed when he heard the recording. His military advisors looked less certain, but they maintained brave faces. The numbers didn't lie. The force at Haven's Gate consisted of 1,200 warships. Each one was heavily armed, their weapons tested in 100 campaigns. One ship, no matter how large, couldn't possibly fight that many. Could it? "Ignore the threat," the Imperator commanded. "Humanity is bluffing. They built a large ship to intimidate us, but size means nothing without firepower. Destroy it." The order went out. 1,200 warships oriented on the Leviathan and opened fire with everything they had. Kinetic rounds moving at significant fractions of light speed hammered into the target. Plasma torpedoes, each one capable of melting a mountain, splashed against the hull. Antimatter warheads detonated with the force of small suns. The concentrated firepower was enough to crack a planet's crust. It was enough to vaporize a fleet. The Leviathan's shields didn't even flicker. The bombardment continued for 5 full minutes. They threw everything they had at the massive vessel, expending enough ordnance to conquer a dozen worlds. Weapons that could pierce any known defense shattered harmlessly against whatever protected the human ship. When the firing finally stopped, more from depleted ammunition than any conscious decision, the Leviathan sat exactly as before, completely undamaged, utterly unconcerned. Then it responded. Hatches opened across the Leviathan's hull, thousands upon thousands of them like a hive releasing its swarm. Small craft poured out in a glittering cloud, so numerous they looked like a silver fog surrounding the massive vessel. Not fighters in the traditional sense, the watching realized. Drones. Automated combat platforms, each one small and fast and expendable. But there were so many of them. The drone swarm hit the fleet like a natural disaster. They moved with impossible coordination, no human reaction time slowing their responses. They darted between the massive warships, too small and quick to target effectively, and they tore the vessels apart. Some drones carried cutting lasers that sliced through armor like paper. Others deployed electromagnetic pulses that fried electronics and left ships dead in space. Still others simply attached themselves to hulls and detonated, shaped charges punching through weak points with surgical precision. They tried to adapt. They activated point defense systems, filled space with shrapnel fields, even resorted to ramming the drones with their own hulls. Nothing worked. For every drone they destroyed, 10 more took its place. The Leviathan just kept launching them, an apparently inexhaustible supply pouring from its vast hull. In 20 minutes, half the occupation fleet was disabled or destroyed. The survivors broke formation, some trying to flee, others making desperate last stands. The drones pursued relentlessly, showing no mercy, taking no prisoners. Ships that surrendered were disabled. Ships that fought were destroyed. The efficiency was terrifying. Then the Leviathan demonstrated why the drones were just its opening move. A single weapon port opened on the massive vessel's prow. It was tiny compared to the ship's overall size, barely noticeable against the vast hull, but the energy readings it generated made every sensor in the system scream warnings. Power levels spiked into ranges that shouldn't be possible. Whatever was about to fire was drawing enough energy to light a small star. The beam that emerged was beautiful and terrible. It didn't explode things or burn them. It unmade them. Where the beam touched, matter simply ceased to exist, unraveling at the molecular level. A battleship 3 kilometers long simply dissolved, its atoms spreading out into a dissipating cloud of fundamental particles. The weapon swept through the formation like a scythe through wheat. 10 ships, 20, 50, each one erased from existence in seconds. They screamed into their communication nets, broadcasting desperate pleas for mercy. The Leviathan ignored them all. The beam continued its work with methodical precision. In less than an hour, the entire occupation force was eliminated. 900 ships destroyed, 300 disabled and drifting. Not a single human vessel had participated. The Leviathan had done it all alone. Admiral's face appeared on every screen in the Haven's gate system. He looked tired, sad even, but his voice remained steady. Let it be known that humanity takes no pleasure in this. We are not conquerors. We are not warmongers, but we will protect our own. He paused. Imperator, you have 8 hours to withdraw from all human territory and return our people. The Leviathan is coming to your home system next. I suggest you don't make me use this weapon again. The transmission ended. The massive vessel oriented itself toward the home worlds and began to move. Not fast, not rushing, just an inevitable, inexorable approach. A promise and a threat combined. The galaxy watched in horror. At Copper Ridge, The Vex military command made a different calculation. They had seen what happened at Haven's Gate. They had watched the Leviathan demonstrate power beyond anything known, and they decided that retreating while they could was better than dying for pride. But they made one final mistake. The Vex commander, a being whose species thought in pure mathematics and probabilities, transmitted a message. We will withdraw from Copper Ridge, but the human miners remain our prisoners. They are our guarantee of safe passage. Once we are clear of human space, we will release them unharmed. The Leviathan appeared in the Copper Ridge system 6 hours later. Admiral's response was immediate and cold. You have 1 hour to release all human civilians, unconditionally, immediately, or I will take them from you. Impossible, the Vex commander calculated. They are distributed across our entire fleet, inside shielded holding areas. Your scans cannot penetrate our hull shielding. You cannot know where they are. Any attempt to beam them out would kill them. You're right, acknowledged. Your shields are very good. They block standard scans completely. There was a pause. Too bad we don't use standard scans. The Leviathan activated systems that made the spatial disruptor cannon look primitive. Energy readings spiked across spectrums the Vex didn't even know existed. Then, one by one, the human miners simply vanished from the Vex ships, teleported through shields that were supposed to be impenetrable, extracted with such precision that the Vex couldn't even detect the beam signatures until after the humans were gone. In 17 minutes, every single human civilian at Copper Ridge was aboard the Leviathan, safe, unharmed, angry as hell but alive. The Vex commander stared at his now empty holding cells in disbelief. How is that possible? Our shields are designed to block all known teleportation technology. All known technology, agreed. Unfortunately for you, we don't share everything we know. His face hardened. You threatened to kill civilians. You tried to use innocent people as shields. That, the Vex consortium, was a mistake. The Vex fleet tried to retreat, their ships jumping to hyperspace in a desperate attempt to escape. The Leviathan didn't pursue them. It didn't need to. Every Vex vessel simultaneously lost power, their systems shutting down as if someone had flipped a switch. Ships dropped out of hyperspace randomly, scattered across a dozen systems, dead in space, helpless. Your technology is very advanced, said to the drifting ships, but it's all computerized, all networked, all connected, and we are very, very good with computers. He paused. You'll get your ships back when you agree to our terms. Every single civilian returned, full reparations, and you never threaten humanity again. Those are the conditions. There will be no negotiation. The Vex consortium, their entire fleet disabled by a cyber warfare attack they hadn't even detected until it was complete, surrendered within the hour. That left the Eldest Collective. The Eldest had been traveling space for 10 million years. They had seen civilizations rise and fall. They had witnessed technological marvels and catastrophes. They considered themselves beyond the petty conflicts of younger species. They didn't conquer worlds. They simply took what interested them, studied it, and moved on. They had taken thousands of humans from new seasons. Their bioships, living vessels grown from genetic templates older than human civilization, were scattered across 100 systems. The humans aboard were being studied, analyzed, cataloged. The Eldest meant them no harm, really. They were simply specimens. Interesting specimens, but specimens nonetheless. The Leviathan arrived at the last known location of an Eldest bioship. The ship was gone, of course. The Eldest had scattered their fleet the moment they learned what happened at Haven's Gate and Copper Ridge. They thought themselves safe in the vastness of space. They thought humanity couldn't possibly find them all. They were wrong. The Leviathan activated another impossible system, temporal scanners, technology that tracked quantum signatures backward through time itself. The scientists watching from 1,000 worlds saw readings that violated everything they understood about physics. You couldn't scan through time. You couldn't trace ships through hyperspace jumps. The math didn't work. But humanity had apparently decided that impossible just meant no one else had figured it out yet. Within 3 hours, the Leviathan had located every single eldest bioship, all 200 of them, scattered across a volume of space measuring hundreds of light years. An admiral sent them all the same message. Release the humans, now, or I will burn your archive world to ashes. The archive world was the eldest's most sacred place. 10 million years of collected knowledge, stored in genetic memory banks grown into the planet's crust itself. Every discovery, every observation, every piece of wisdom the eldest had ever gathered. Losing it would be like losing their entire civilization's soul. Part 3. The eldest collective's response came within minutes, not from one voice but from dozens speaking in perfect unison, the way their shared consciousness always communicated. You would not dare. The archive world is sacred to all species who value knowledge. Its destruction would be an unforgivable crime against civilization itself. Admiral's face showed no emotion. You abducted our civilians. You scattered them across 100 systems to prevent exactly this kind of rescue. You took people from their homes, from their families, and treated them like laboratory specimens. He leaned closer to the camera. You valued your scientific curiosity over their basic rights. Now I value their lives over your accumulated knowledge. Return them all, immediately and unharmed, or I will show you the same disregard you showed them. You are bluffing. No species would commit such an atrocity. Gestured off-screen. The Leviathan's main weapon, the spatial disruptor that had erased ships from existence, powered up. Its targeting system locked onto the archive world, 300 light-years away. Every sensor in the eldest's network detected it. The energy readings were enough to crack a planet's mantle. I am not bluffing, said quietly. I am keeping a promise. You took our people. I am taking them back. You have 1 hour to comply. After that, your archive world becomes a lifeless rock and 10 million years of history becomes dust. Your choice. The eldest went silent. Their bioships hung in space across 100 systems, each one containing humans who had been pulled from their lives without warning. Inside the ship's organic corridors, the abducted people huddled together, frightened and confused. They had been treated well enough, no physical harm done. But they had been taken, studied like animals, kept in cells grown from living tissue that pulsed with alien heartbeats. The eldest's collective consciousness debated at speeds human minds couldn't match. They ran probability calculations. They considered alternatives. They weighed the value of their prisoners against the value of their history. In the end, the math was simple. The humans would die eventually, replaced by new generations. But the archive world was irreplaceable. Knowledge once lost could never be fully recovered. 47 minutes after its ultimatum, teleportation beams activated across 100 systems simultaneously. Every human the eldest had taken appeared aboard the Leviathan, carefully placed in prepared receiving areas where human medical teams waited. Families reunited in tears. People collapsed in relief. Some were angry, some traumatized, but all were alive and unharmed. The last human materialized aboard the Leviathan, with 30 seconds left on its countdown. Wise choice, said. Now withdraw from all human space. Immediately. If I detect a single eldest bioship within 100 light-years of any human world, I will assume hostile intent. And next time, I won't give you an hour to think about it. The eldest's bioships turned and fled into deep space, their ancient collective consciousness reeling from the encounter. In 10 million years, they had never been threatened so completely, so effortlessly. The younger species had surprised them. That didn't happen often. With all 3 invasions resolved, the Leviathan oriented itself toward the Galactic Council's headquarters at Nexus Prime. The massive vessel jumped to hyperspace, its gravitational wake disturbing space itself. 6 hours later, it emerged at the heart of civilized space, positioning itself directly in front of the Council station. Every weapon on Nexus Prime activated automatically, targeting systems locking onto the massive human ship. Thousands of defense platforms, hundreds of patrol ships, all pointed at the Leviathan. The combined firepower could have destroyed a small fleet. Nobody fired. They had all seen what happened to the Admiral requested to address the council. After hurried consultation, they granted permission. What else could they do? The human supervessel hung outside like a storm cloud, dark and massive and terrifying in its implications. Appeared in the council chamber, his hologram standing in the center of the vast room. He looked around slowly, meeting the eyes of delegates from 200 civilizations. Some looked angry, most looked afraid. A few looked calculating, already wondering how to turn this new reality to their advantage. "People of the Galactic Council," began, his voice filling the chamber. "Humanity sought only peaceful coexistence. We came to the stars hopping to find friends, partners, fellow travelers in the great void. We built a small fleet because we wanted to demonstrate that we weren't a threat. We practiced restraint in our dealings. We chose diplomacy over force at every opportunity." He paused, letting that sink in. "You mistook our restraint for weakness. You mistook our diplomacy for fear. You saw our small military presence and assumed we were helpless." His voice hardened. "3 of your empires invaded our worlds based on that assumption. They attacked our colonies, killed our civilians, and abducted our people. They did this because they thought we couldn't stop them." The chamber was absolutely silent. Not even the ever-present translator hum broke the quiet. "The Leviathan is not a conquest weapon," continued. "It is not a tool of empire or a symbol of dominance. It is a shield. It is humanity's guarantee that we will never be victims again." He gestured around him. "We built it in secret over 2 centuries, working in a pocket dimension where your sensors couldn't detect it. We built it because we knew, eventually, someone would test us. We hoped we would never need to reveal it. We hoped wrong." Ambassador appeared besides hologram, returned from Earth for this moment. She took over the address. "Humanity possessed this power for decades," she said. "We could have conquered worlds. We could have demanded tribute. We could have made ourselves the dominant force in the galaxy through pure intimidation." She looked around the chamber. "We chose not to. We chose peace. We chose cooperation. We chose to be neighbors instead of masters." She let that statement hang in the air. "The 3 empires that attacked us made a critical mistake. They assumed that because we chose peace, we were incapable of war. They thought our small fleet represented our total capabilities. They never considered that we might be holding back deliberately, that we might value peace not out of weakness but as a genuine choice." The delegate, his scales still bearing scorch marks from his narrow escape from Haven's Gate, spoke up. His voice shook. "You could have warned us. You could have told us about this ship." Turned to face him. "We did warn you. Ambassador, before the attacks began, told you that you had made a grave miscalculation. You laughed at her. You mocked humanity's grief over the prosperity. You saw our pain as an opportunity." Her voice was cold. "No, we don't show our weapons to species who might be tempted to use knowledge of those weapons to plan around them. We revealed the Leviathan only when we had no other choice." The Vex representative rippled forward. "What do you want from us? Reparations, territory, resources?" "We want what we've always wanted," answered. "Peace, fair treatment, the right to exist without constantly watching our backs." He paused. "And we want to ensure this never happens again." Over the next hours, humanity laid out its terms. The 3 aggressor empires would pay reparations to the families of everyone killed or traumatized by their actions. They would formally apologize and recognize humanity's sovereignty over all claimed territories. They would withdraw all forces from within 100 light-years of human space. In return, humanity would not seek revenge. The Leviathan would not hunt down the fleets that had invaded human worlds. The captured, Vex, and Eldest personnel would be returned unharmed. Humanity would forgive, though it would not forget. But the most important term was simple. Humanity demanded a permanent seat on the Galactic Council's security board, with full veto power over any military action. Never again would humanity be ignored when it spoke. Never again would its diplomatic efforts be dismissed as the pleadings of a weak species. The Council agreed to every term. They had no choice, really. The Leviathan hung in space outside, a silent reminder that humanity had the power to back up its demands. But more importantly, they recognized that humanity was being far more merciful than it needed to be. A species that could disable entire fleets, penetrate any shield, and track ships through time itself could have demanded anything. Instead, it asked only for respect and security. Trade agreements flooded in within days. Dozens of smaller species, seeing humanity's restraint and power, requested mutual defense pacts. They had been bullied by larger empires for centuries, and now they saw a potential protector. A species with overwhelming force that nevertheless chose not to conquer or dominate. The Leviathan remained on station at Nexus Prime for 3 months. Its presence changed the political landscape of the galaxy more than any war could have. Aggressive empires suddenly found diplomacy more appealing. Border disputes were resolved through negotiation instead of force. The threat of humanity's intervention hung over every conflict like a judge's gavel, unspoken, but always present. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the Leviathan departed. It jumped to hyperspace without warning, leaving no trace of where it had gone. Some speculated it returned to its pocket dimension. Others thought it stationed itself somewhere in deep space, watching and waiting. A few conspiracy theorists suggested there were multiple Leviathans, hidden across the galaxy. Nobody knew for sure. Humanity wasn't saying. But the implication was clear. The Leviathan was out there, somewhere, ready to respond if humanity's peace was threatened again. That uncertainty proved more effective than any permanent military presence. Every empire had to consider the possibility that their aggressive action might summon the massive vessel from wherever it lurked. Years passed. The galaxy entered an unprecedented era of peace. Wars still happened, conflicts still arose, but they were smaller, more restrained. Nobody wanted to be the empire that brought the Leviathan out of hiding. Humanity used its new position carefully. It didn't demand tribute or territory. It didn't impose its values on other species. Instead, it worked to strengthen the Galactic Council's peacekeeping functions, pushing for diplomatic solutions to conflicts before they escalated. Human ambassadors became known as honest brokers, species that could be trusted to mediate fairly because they had the power to enforce any agreement but chose not to use it except when absolutely necessary. Ambassador, promoted to Earth's chief representative to the Council, became one of the most influential figures in galactic politics. Her quiet warnings carried weight. Her suggestions were taken seriously, not because humanity threatened, but because everyone remembered what happened to those who had ignored humanity's warnings before. On Haven's Gate, New Seasons, and Copper Ridge, life returned to normal. The colonies rebuilt. The traumatized healed. Children who had been abducted by the eldest grew up and had families of their own, telling there about the time they were stolen from their beds and how the great ship had brought them home. The Prosperity's crew were honored as martyrs across human space. 43 names were carved into memorials on every human world. 43 people who had died simply for being in the wrong place at the wrong time, whose deaths had revealed humanity's true strength to the galaxy. Their memorial on Earth became a pilgrimage site, a place where people came to remember that even in the darkness of space, human values endured. Patience, restraint, the unwavering will to protect their own. Deep in classified military archives, Admiral filed his final report on the Leviathan's deployment. He noted the vessel's performance, the successful rescue of all human civilians, the minimal casualties inflicted despite overwhelming force available. He recommended the Leviathan remain on standby, ready but hidden, a guarantee of humanity's security that didn't need to be seen to be effective. His last line in the report read simply, "Deterrence achieved, mission complete." But he added a handwritten note at the bottom, something that would never appear in official records. "We showed them mercy today. We demonstrated our power and then chose not to abuse it. We proved that strength and restraint can coexist. Every civilization that watched our actions learned that humanity values peace not because we're weak, but because we choose to be civilized." He paused, pen hovering over the paper. "I hope they remember this lesson, because if they force us to teach it again, we may not be so gentle." The note was filed away in secure storage, where it would remain for decades. But its sentiment spread through humanity's military command. They had revealed their sword. They had shown the galaxy that humanity could fight, could destroy, could dominate if necessary. Now came the harder part, proving that having a sword didn't mean you had to use it, that power could serve peace instead of undermining it, that the strongest species in the galaxy could also be the. Only time would tell if the lesson would stick, but for now the galaxy was at peace, and somewhere in the depths of space the Leviathan waited, patient and watchful, a guardian in the darkness. Humanity's hidden strength had been revealed, and the galaxy had learned to respect it.